G'day mates, we are back with a new series. In this series we won't be making any coffees, but what we will do is talk about coffee lingo. In particular, what I'll do is every now and then we will make an episode where we cover 3 coffee terms used in the coffee industry and we will explain them basically. Anyway, today what I was thinking is to cover 3 different terms used in my industry. The first one will be about specialty coffee and commodity coffee, so the difference between those two. Then the different brewing methods, which are immersion brewing and infusion brewing. And then we have espresso brewing as well, but I'll talk about that later. And the third and final topic will be bitterness and strength in coffee, because a lot of people, I think, confuse those two. Anyway, this will be the first episode, and every now and then we'll make more episodes like this, depending on how we feel. We'll still make coffee on the Gadget Classic, but I thought we mix things up a bit, because I didn't want to keep this channel only about the Gadget Classic because it gets boring, right? So let's get into it. The first thing I wanted to talk today about is specialty coffee. You've probably went to a supermarket to buy some coffee beans, and then you've been to a specialty cafe and you've heard this term specialty coffee. So you might be wondering, am I buying specialty coffee from the supermarket? What's specialty coffee? What's the opposite of specialty coffee, and so on. The easiest way to tackle this topic would be to talk about what's specialty coffee and the opposite of specialty coffee, which is commodity coffee. Now, specialty coffee is a minority in the coffee industry, which means that the majority of the coffee beans sold are commodity coffee. So we could say that specialty coffee beans are the cream of the crop, or the best that the farmers or the coffee industry can offer to us, the users, right? Within the coffee industry, we have the Specialty Coffee Association, which has put out a scoring system to score coffee beans, and specialty coffee is considered beans that score 80 points or above. So anything below 80, the score of 80 is considered commodity coffee. Also, in the specialty coffee industry or in countries of origin, the 2 words that I would point out that best describe specialty coffee are traceability and quality control. So traceability is the ability to trace where the coffee beans have come from. So usually in the specialty coffee industry, very often you could trace those beans not only to a specific farm, but sometimes even to a specific drying lot within the farm. And sometimes that would be considered also a micro lot or a nano lot, but that's complicating it too much. Anyway, as I said, it's traceability and then quality control. So quality control is very rigorous when it comes to specialty coffee, and it's applied across from the first step, which is the coffee plant, to picking the cherries and growing the cherries before that, to drying, pulping, sorting, processing, and then to exporting, roasting, cupping, and so on. So there is all of these quality control steps that ensure that you get the best out of those beans. On the opposite side, we have commodity coffee. Commodity coffee is literally just as any other commodity on the stock market or the stock exchange, just like oil, just like coal, corn, and whatever. So it's traded as a commodity, and most of the time it's traded as coffee futures. So what happens here is you have huge farms producing tons and tons and tons of coffee, and then these huge amounts of coffee are traded on a stock exchange, and then some big company or multinational company such as Nestle or maybe Illy or another coffee company would buy a shitload of coffee with questionable quality, and you can't really trace it, such as you could do with specialty coffee. So most of the time you only know the country of origin of that coffee when it comes to commodity coffee. And they would buy a shitload of coffee, and then they apply their own quality control to it after it has been grown and processed and exported. So that is the main difference. I'm not saying that the quality of commodity coffee is very low, because all of these big multinational companies have different types of quality control implemented to get the best out of the coffee. But at the same time, that quality control is not applied across all the steps like it is in the specialty coffee industry. So that's covered the topic of specialty versus commodity coffee. Let's move on to brewing methods. So we have immersion brewing and we have infusion brewing. So in immersion brewing, what we have is a set dose of coffee that is immersed in water. So that's how the coffee grounds are being extracted. Some ways of making immersion brewed coffee is the French press, the AeroPress. You could also do a cold brew is also considered immersion brewing, although this time you're leaving the coffee grounds in cold water. So those three are best describe the immersion brewing method. Coffee experts consider immersion brewing not an optimal way of brewing coffee, because water temperature across time decreases, and as the water temperature is decreasing, so does the extraction rate of the coffee grounds decrease as well, which means it's not optimal. The optimal way to extract coffee would be with infusion brewing. So here we have a constant flow of hot water in a bed of coffee grounds. That's the methods that best describe infusion brewing is your manual pour over methods or automated pour over methods, such as the Mocha Master that makes a batch brew. Then your Italian cafetiera is also considered infusion brewing. Espresso is also considered infusion brewing, although sometimes it's put in a category of its own, because it is the only brewing method that involves high pressure, and it's also the only brewing method that involves a brewing ratio that is very concentrated, right? So both immersion and infusion brewing methods use a ratio from between 1 to 10, meaning 1 gram of coffee for every 10 grams of water, to 1 to 20. But when it comes to espresso, it's most of the time it's 1 to 1.5 to 1 to 2.5, which means for every gram of coffee you put from between 1.5 grams of water to 2.5 grams of water. So that's why sometimes espresso is put into a category of its own, although you could also consider it part of the infusion brewing methods. Finally, we have the third topic of the day: strength and bitterness. Some people have done it themselves. You go to a cafe, you get a coffee, and the coffee tastes milky, right? And then you go and complain to your barista and you say, oh, this coffee is not strong enough, I want it stronger. Or sometimes you go in a cafe and you order a coffee and you tell the barista, make sure the coffee is strong. That's what I usually get. Like it happens always, especially with older people. Now, what do they mean by this when they say make sure the coffee is strong? I think what they mean is they correlate bitterness with strength of coffee, right? So they think that if the coffee is bitter, then it must be strong. But that's not necessarily true, because strength in coffee is expressed in something called TDS, or total dissolved solids. That is measured with a refractometer, which is a tool that winemakers use when they make wine, but you could also use in the coffee. That tool measures the percentage of extraction in the coffee, which means if you've had 10 grams of ground coffee, what's the percentage of those 10 grams that have been extracted? In espresso, it's usually around between 7 to 10% TDS, which means that out of those 10 grams of coffee, around 0.7 to 1 gram of that coffee has been totally extracted and is contained in the beverage, in the espresso. But you could also get a under-extracted coffee that's still bitter, but that doesn't mean it's strong. And particular cases when that could happen is if you had a very dark roasted coffee, or if you just left some coffee grounds in hot water over for an hour, then it would taste probably like oil, like shit, right? It would be bitter, but it wouldn't mean that it's strong. What I suggest to people is, because I work in a cafe where we roast our own beans and we have different blends that have different tasting notes. So what I suggest to people that want their coffee stronger is maybe try a darker roasted blend, something that probably is most similar to a classic Italian style roast, where your coffee would taste probably on the darker notes, such as dark chocolate, or probably a burnt shoe or something like that, or rubber, because people sometimes exaggerate when it comes to the strength of the coffee. But anyway, what I was trying to say when it comes to strength and bitterness is sometimes you can have a strong coffee that's not bitter, but also you can have a bitter coffee that's not strong. So it's not necessary that those two correlate. So I hope if you've ever done this in a cafe, you consider maybe asking for a darker roasted coffee, or maybe you could also ask to put an extra shot of espresso in your coffee to get that extra body and more weight on the palate from the coffee. I think we covered those 3 topics pretty quickly, but also didn't go into too much details, not to complicate stuff. We will be doing this every two weeks or something like that, depending on how much time we have. So thank you very much for watching, and I would also like to encourage you, if you have any terms from the coffee industry that you would like me to cover, to comment in the comments below, or maybe send us a message or something if there is anything you would like to know. And that's about it. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye. Hey, buckaroos, how'd you like that? No matter if you did or didn't, tell us what you think in the comments below. We love you either way. Check out the 2 suggested videos, subscribe to the channel, and while you're here, have a look at our social media accounts. We have some cool content over there as well. Alrighty, time to fuck out of here. Peace.